In the frozen silence of a giant space station, a rare life was fading. Nala had nowhere left to go. She knocked on the doors of the powerful. But to the reptilians, she was just a pest to be ignored. The machines scanned her for money. Finding none, they left her to die in the snow. She reached the 13th door. It was rusty, old, and hidden in the shadows of the poor sector. Suddenly, the door swung open. A human girl stood there, and for the first time, Nala saw warmth. She didn't ask for money. She only saw a soul that needed saving. This was the human way. The hub was not a home. It was a giant piece of metal floating in the dark, cold corners of space. Thousands of different alien species lived there, but they did not live together. They lived in layers. The rich lived at the top in glowing towers, and the poor lived at the bottom in the shadows. Right now, the hub was going through the deep freeze. This was a season where the station's heaters could not keep up with the freezing temperatures of space. Everything was covered in blue ice. The air was so cold it felt like needles hitting your skin. In the middle of this icy silence, something moved. It was Nala. She was a small creature, looking very much like a cat from Earth, but she was different. She had 4 soft ears that flickered at every sound, and her fur was a beautiful, glowing blue. But today, the glow was fading. Nala was badly hurt. A deep cut on her side was leaking silver blood. The blood froze as soon as it touched the floor. She was shaking so hard that she could barely stand. Her breath came out in small white clouds. She was dying, and she knew it. She needed warmth. She needed a miracle. The first door, the cold scales. Nala dragged her tired body to the rich sector. She saw a large, golden door. This was the home of the Saurians, a race of powerful reptilian aliens. They were strong and had plenty of heat. Nala used her last bit of strength to knock on the door with her small paw. Thump. Thump. The door slid open. A tall Saurian with yellow eyes and green scales looked down. He was wearing a thick, heated robe. Nala looked up at him, her eyes crying for help. She let out a small, weak meow. The Saurian's face twisted in disgust. A stray. In this sector, he hissed. Pests are not allowed here. You will get silver blood on my expensive floor. Before Nala could move, he slammed the door. The sound of the lock clicking felt like a hammer in Nala's heart. The 5th door, the metal heart. Nala kept walking. Her legs felt like lead. She reached the sector of the synthetics, the machine people. These were aliens who had traded their bodies for metal and wires. She knocked on door number 5. A robot-like alien stepped out. Its eyes were glowing red sensors. It looked at Nala and scanned her. State your business, the machine voice said. Nala shivered and leaned against the cold wall. She had no words, only her pain. Scanning for credits. The robot said. 0 credits found. You have no money to pay for shelter. Logical conclusion, entry denied. The door closed with a cold, mechanical hiss. To the machines, Nala wasn't a living being. She was just a 0 in their system. The 12th door, the cruel elites. By the time Nala reached the 12th door, she was crawling. Her beautiful blue fur was now turning white from the frost. Her 4 ears were pinned back against her head. This was the sector of the highborns, aliens who thought they were the masters of the universe. The door opened before she could even knock. A group of highborns were leaving for a party. They were tall, elegant, and wore shimmering clothes. Nala reached out a trembling paw, touching the shoe of the leader. Ugh, the alien screamed, as if she had touched trash. Get this filthy animal away from me. It's bleeding everywhere. One of the highborn guards stepped forward. He didn't just ignore Nala, he raised his heavy boot. Crack. He kicked Nala away. Nala flew through the air and landed in a pile of frozen snow. The aliens laughed and walked away, their perfume smelling like flowers in the middle of a graveyard. The 13th door, the final hope. Nala lay in the snow. She couldn't feel her paws anymore. Her vision was getting blurry. She looked up at the dark sky of the station. She was ready to close her eyes and never wake up. But then, she smelled something. It wasn't perfume, and it wasn't the smell of cold metal. It was the smell of soup. And old wood. She crawled toward the smell. She was now in the poor sector, the lowest part of the hub. This was where the weak species lived. She saw a small, rusty door. It was dented and old. There were no golden lights here. No machines. Just a simple, brown door. This was the 13th door. Nala didn't knock. She didn't have the strength. She simply fell against the door and let out one last, tiny cry. It was a sound of total surrender. Suddenly, the door didn't just open, it swung wide. A bright, warm light hit Nala's face. It felt like the sun. A figure stood there. It wasn't tall like the highborns or scaly like the Saurians. It was a human woman. She was wearing an old, oversized sweater and holding a warm mug. The woman dropped her mug. It shattered on the floor, but she didn't care. She knelt down in the snow immediately. "Oh my God," the human whispered. Her voice was soft, like a blanket. "You're freezing, you're hurt." Nala felt too warm, soft hands reach out. They didn't kick her. They didn't scan her for money. They picked her up and pulled her close to a warm chest. "Don't worry, little one," the human said, her eyes filling with tears of pity. "I've got you. You're safe now." As the rusty door closed, shutting out the cold world, Nala felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt a heartbeat. A human heartbeat. The door clicked shut, locking out the freezing winds of the hub. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old books and toasted bread. Elena did not waste a single second. She rushed to her small bed, clearing away piles of clothes to lay the shivering creature down. Nala's silver blood was staining the white sheets, but Elena didn't care about the mess. She ran to her tiny kitchen and grabbed a bowl of warm water and a clean cloth. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from the sight of such a beautiful creature in so much pain. She had seen many aliens on this station, but she had never seen one as delicate and glowing as this little blue cat. As Elena gently wiped the frozen blood from Nala's fur, the small cat opened her eyes. Nala was confused. In the other 12 homes, the lights were bright and the walls were made of cold metal. But here, the light was soft and orange. The room was filled with stuff, strange pictures on the walls, a small green plant in a pot, and a soft rug on the floor. It was messy, but it felt alive. Nala watched the human woman. Elena was talking to her in a low, humming voice, even though she knew the cat couldn't understand her words. This was human comfort, a concept Nala had only heard of in ancient space legends. The suspense deepened when Elena noticed Nala's collar. Under the thick fur, there was a thin band of shifting metal that pulsed with a strange purple light. When Elena touched it, a holographic map flickered into the air for just a second before disappearing. Elena gasped and pulled her hand back. She realized then that this was no ordinary stray animal. This cat was carrying a secret, something so valuable that someone would surely come looking for it. A cold shiver went down Elena's spine. She looked at her thin, wooden door. It was the only thing protecting them from the monsters outside. She knew that by opening her door, she had invited a great danger into her life. Suddenly, Nala's 4 ears twitched at the same time. Her glowing blue fur began to stand on end, and a low growl came from her throat. She wasn't looking at Elena, she was looking at the door. Outside, in the hallway of the poor sector, the heavy sound of metal boots echoed against the floor. Clang! Clang. Clang. It wasn't the sound of a normal person walking. It was the sound of a hunter. Nala's species had a special gift, they could sense the intent of others. She could feel a dark, hungry energy approaching the room. The hunter was close, and he was checking every door. Elena saw the fear in Nala's eyes and understood immediately. She turned off her only lamp, plunging the room into shadows. She grabbed a heavy metal tool from her workbench and stood near the entrance. Her heart was beating like a drum, so loud she thought the hunter might hear it. She was just a human, a weak species with no armor and no advanced weapons. But as she looked at the wounded cat on her bed, something changed in her eyes. The fear was still there, but it was buried under a layer of fierce protection. She wouldn't let anyone take this soul back into the cold. The footsteps stopped right outside the 13th door. Silence filled the room. The handle of the door began to turn slowly, creaking under the pressure of a powerful hand. Nala held her breath, her silver blood glowing faintly in the dark. The suspense was breaking the air. Then, a deep, raspy voice spoke through the wood. "I know the creature is in there, human. Open the door, and I might let you live. Hide it, and I will burn this entire floor to ash." Elena didn't move. She gripped her tool tighter and whispered to herself, "Try me." The heavy silence outside the door was broken by a cold, metallic laugh. This was not just any hunter, this was Varkas the Collector. He was a massive creature, half machine and half beast, with 3 glowing red eyes that could see through walls using heat signatures. Varkas was famous across the galaxy for finding things that did not want to be found. He didn't care about the laws of the hub or the lives of the poor. To him, Nala was not a living being, she was a stellar guardian, a rare creature whose silver blood could power a starship for 100 years. Varkas stood 7 feet tall, his armor covered in the frost of the deep freeze, his mechanical hand resting on a heavy pulse cannon. He knew the cat was behind that thin, rusty door, and he knew a weak human was protecting it. Before attacking Elena's door, Varkas decided to humiliate the human. He turned his attention to the other residents of the hallway. He kicked the door of the 12th apartment, the home of the elites who had earlier kicked Nala away. The wealthy aliens inside trembled as Varkas walked in. "Where is the blue creature?" he roared, his voice sounding like grinding metal. The high-born aliens, who usually acted so superior, fell to their knees in fear. They quickly pointed their long, thin fingers toward the end of the hall, toward the 13th door. The human took it, they screamed. "The human, Elena. She is the one you want. Please, don't hurt us." Varkas sneered at their cowardice. He found it funny that the richest species in the galaxy were the first to beg for mercy, while the poor human in the 13th room had remained silent and brave. Back inside the room, Elena could hear the loud voices and the sound of her neighbors crying. She felt a deep sense of disappointment. She had lived near these aliens for years, and yet, they were ready to sacrifice her life just to save their own. She looked down at Nala. The cat's silver blood was beginning to glow brighter, reacting to the danger outside. Nala stood up on her 4 shaky legs. Suddenly, her 2 extra ears began to rotate like radar dishes. A soft, humming sound started to fill the room. Nala looked at Elena and let out a sound that wasn't a meow, it was a musical note, pure and powerful. For a moment, Elena felt a strange energy flow into her own body. Her fear didn't disappear, but her muscles felt stronger, and her mind felt sharper. It was as if Nala was linking with her, preparing the human for the fight of her life. Varkas walked back to Elena's door, his heavy boots cracking the ice on the floor. He used his bioscanner, a device on his wrist that showed the outlines of everyone inside the room. He saw the small shape of the cat and the larger shape of the human standing right behind the door. "Listen to me, human," Varkas said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. "I have killed warriors 3 times your size. I have destroyed worlds for less than what that cat is worth. You are a human, your species has no claws, no fangs, and no magic. You are nothing but soft skin and brittle bones. Why die for a beast that isn't even yours? He waited for a second, expecting Elena to cry or beg, but there was only silence from the other side. The suspense in the hallway was so thick that the other aliens held their breath. They watched from their doorways, waiting for the human to give up. But then, they heard Elena's voice. It wasn't loud, but it was as steady as a rock. "You're right, Varkas," she said. "We humans don't have claws. We don't have 3 eyes. But we have something you will never understand. We have the habit of picking up what the rest of the galaxy throws away. And once we pick something up, we never, ever let go." This was the true HFY spirit, the stubbornness of humanity. Elena reached for a heavy metal pipe on her table and took a defensive stance. She knew she was outgunned, but she was ready to turn her tiny home into a fortress. Varkas growled, his patience finally snapping. He raised his mechanical fist, which began to glow with orange energy. He wasn't going to use his gun yet. He wanted to smash the door and crush the human with his bare hands to show everyone what happens to those who defy him. "Have it your way, little monkey," he hissed. He drew back his fist to deliver a blow that would shatter the metal door into 1,000 pieces. But just as he was about to strike, the lights in the entire sector began to flicker. The air grew heavy with static electricity. Inside the room, Nala's blue fur was no longer just glowing, it was sparking with white lightning. The 13th door was about to become the site of a battle that the hub would never forget. The metal door did not just break, it exploded inward with a deafening roar. Varkas the Collector stepped through the smoke, his heavy mechanical boots crushing the shattered pieces of the 13th door. He looked like a nightmare made of steel and scales. His red eyes scanned the small, dark room, quickly locking onto Elena, who was standing in front of her bed. To Varkas, she looked pathetic. She was small, her hands were shaking, and her only weapon was a heavy industrial wrench she used for fixing pipes. Varkas laughed, a sound like glass breaking in a blender. "Is this your champion?" he shouted to the aliens watching from the hallway. "A hairless monkey with a piece of scrap metal? This will be over in 3 seconds." He raised his massive arm, his pulse cannon glowing with a deadly orange light, ready to vaporize everything in the room. But Varkas made a mistake that many had made before him, he underestimated the human, protective instinct. Just as he was about to pull the trigger, Elena didn't run away. Instead, she did something completely insane. She screamed a loud, primal battle cry and threw a heavy glass jar of highly flammable cleaning solvent at his face. The jar shattered against Varkas's mechanical eye, and before he could wipe the liquid away, Elena lunged forward. She wasn't fighting like a trained soldier, she was fighting like a mother protecting her child. She swung her heavy wrench with every bit of strength she had, slamming it into the delicate sensors on Varkas's wrist. The pulse cannon misfired, sending a blast of energy into the ceiling instead of at Elena. The room shook, and dust fell like snow, but Elena did not stop. The other aliens watching from the hallway were frozen in shock. They had never seen a species act this way. In the galaxy, if you were outmatched, you surrendered. It was the logical thing to do. But humans were not logical. Varkas roared in pain and frustration, swinging his giant fist at Elena. The blow hit her shoulder, throwing her across the room. She hit the wall hard and slid to the floor. Varkas stepped toward her, his face twisted in rage. "You stupid creature," he growled. "You broke my scanner. Now I will make sure your death is very, very slow." He raised his foot to crush her, but then he noticed something strange. Elena was smiling. Even with blood trickling down her forehead and her shoulder clearly hurt, she was looking past him, toward the bed. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped even further. Nala, the blue cat, began to rise into the air, floating a few inches above the bed. Her 4 ears were wide open, and the silver blood on her fur was now flowing in reverse, back into her wounds, as she healed herself using the energy of the link she had formed with Elena. The white lightning sparking from her fur grew so intense that it blinded Varkas's remaining sensors. Nala wasn't just a pet, she was a living battery of ancient energy, and the human's bravery had unlocked her power. Nala let out a roar that sounded like 1,000 lions, and a wave of blue kinetic energy blasted outward. Varkas, despite his great weight, was lifted off his feet and slammed back into the hallway, crashing into the very aliens who had betrayed Nala. Varkas struggled to stand, his armor sparking and his systems failing. He looked into the room and saw a sight that terrified him. Elena was back on her feet, leaning on her wrench for support, but her eyes were burning with a fierce light. Behind her, the blue cat was glowing like a miniature star. For the first time in his long life, the Collector felt true fear. He realized that he wasn't just fighting a human or an alien cat, he was fighting a pack. Humans were famous for making anything their family, and once they did, they became the most dangerous species in the universe. The suspense in the hallway was gone, replaced by a terrifying realization: the hunt was over, and the hunter had become the prey. Varkas growled and reached for a backup grenade on his belt, his eyes filled with a desperate madness. He knew he couldn't take the cat anymore, but he wanted to take the human down with him. "If I can't have the prize," he hissed, "then no one will." He prepared to prime the explosive, intending to blow up the entire floor of the poor sector. Elena saw his hand move and knew she wouldn't be fast enough to stop him this time. But she didn't move. She stood her ground, blocking Nala with her own body. The hallway fell into a deathly silence as the Collector's finger hovered over the button. The fate of the 13th door hung by a single thread. The Collector's finger was only a millimeter away from the trigger of the grenade. A wicked smile spread across his ugly face because he knew that in a few seconds, everything would be over. But he had never spent much time around humans, so he didn't know about a strange thing called adrenaline. When a human is pushed into a corner, their brain moves faster than a computer. Elena didn't wait for the explosion. She didn't pray or hide. Instead, she grabbed the heavy, boiling tea kettle from her small heater and threw it with perfect aim. The hot water splashed all over Varkas's exposed neck and his mechanical eye. He roared in pain, his hand slipping away from the grenade button. This was the opening Elena needed. She charged forward, her boots hitting the metal floor with a sound of pure defiance. The suspense reached a breaking point as the other aliens in the hallway watched the impossible happen. Elena didn't just hit Varkas, she used her knowledge of the poor sector's old pipes. She reached up and pulled a lever on the wall that controlled the high-pressure steam for the entire floor. With a loud hiss, a cloud of burning white steam sprayed directly into Varkas's face. He was a high-tech hunter, but his sensors were not built for the messy, hot, and dirty fighting style of a desperate human. He was blinded and confused. "You little insect!" Varkas screamed, swinging his heavy arms wildly. "I will crush every bone in your body." He managed to grab Elena's arm, and the sound of her bone cracking echoed in the hallway. Elena gasped in pain, but she didn't let go of her wrench. She bit her lip until it bled, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a scream. This was the moment Nala's true power finally woke up. Seeing Elena getting hurt triggered something deep inside the alien cat's DNA. Nala floated into the center of the hallway, her glowing blue fur now turning into a brilliant, blinding white light. The silver blood that had once stained the floor rose into the air like tiny stars. Nala let out a high-pitched cry that vibrated through the very metal of the space station. Every light bulb in the sector exploded at once, plunging the hallway into darkness, except for the light coming from Nala. The link between the human and the cat was now complete. Elena felt Nala's energy flowing into her, dulling the pain of her broken arm and giving her a second burst of strength. It was a beautiful and terrifying sight, the weakest species and a wounded animal standing together against the greatest hunter in the galaxy. The atmosphere in the hallway began to change. The 12 aliens who had closed their doors were watching through their small windows. They saw Elena, a girl with no armor, standing her ground against a monster. They saw her bleeding, yet she was smiling. This was the human spark, a strange kind of bravery that is contagious. Slowly, one by one, the other doors began to open. A small, thin alien from door 9 stepped out holding a heavy rock. An old mechanic from door 4 came out with a welding torch. They were tired of being afraid. They were tired of seeing the Collector take whatever he wanted. The 12 aliens who had rejected Nala were now standing behind Elena. They weren't soldiers, but they were a pack now. Human influence had turned a group of cowards into a wall of resistance. Varkas backed away, his red eyes flickering as his systems tried to reboot. He looked at the human girl, then at the glowing cat, and finally at the crowd of angry aliens moving toward him. He realized that he had lost the most important thing in a fight, the fear. He no longer held the power of terror over them. This isn't over. Varkas hissed, trying to fix his broken pulse cannon. The hub will hear about this. They will send a fleet to wipe out this entire sector. But as he spoke, Nala moved. She didn't bite or scratch. She simply touched Varkas's metal chest with her glowing paw. A massive surge of blue electricity traveled through his armor, frying his circuits and sending him flying backward down the long hallway until he crashed into the garbage disposal unit at the end. The silence that followed was heavy and thick. Elena fell to her knees, her breath coming in gasps. The adrenaline was leaving her body, and the pain was returning. Nala landed softly next to her, her fur returning to its normal blue glow. The cat walked over and licked the blood from Elena's hand, a soft purr vibrating in her throat. The other aliens stood around them in a circle, looking down at the girl who had changed everything. They realized that the 13th door wasn't just a place of poverty anymore, it was the most important place on the station. But the danger wasn't fully gone. Varkas was defeated, but he had mentioned a fleet. The suspense was no longer about a single hunter, it was about whether the hub would allow a human and a guardian to challenge their cold, heartless rules. The air in the hub was no longer silent. The news of a human standing up to Varkas the Collector spread like wildfire through the vents and corridors of the space station. But the victory felt short-lived. High above, in the Golden Towers, the High Council was angry. They didn't care about the cruelty of Varkas, but they cared very much about the stellar guardian, Nala. To them, Nala was a legendary power source that could make their empires invincible. Within an hour, the sound of heavy engines filled the poor sector. Hundreds of armored security drones and elite soldiers landed in the narrow hallways. Their red lights flickered in the dark, and their heavy guns were all pointed at the 13th door. The suspense was so heavy it felt like the gravity of the station was increasing. Elena stood in front of her broken door, her arm wrapped in a dirty bandage. She looked small against the army of machines and soldiers, but she didn't move an inch. Behind her, the 12 aliens who had once been cowards were now standing in a line, holding whatever tools they could find. The council's leader, a cold alien with silver skin and no eyes, stepped forward. "Step aside, human," he commanded, his voice echoing through the speakers of the drones. "The creature you hold is property of the High Council. It is too valuable to be kept in a slum. Give it to us, and we will give you enough money to buy a planet. Refuse, and we will delete this entire sector from the station's records." It was a terrifying choice, total wealth or total destruction. The other aliens looked at Elena, their breath visible in the freezing air. They were waiting for her to do the human thing. Many species would have taken the money. Many would have run away. But Elena just looked at the council leader and laughed softly. "You think you can buy what she gave me?" Elena asked, her voice shaking with emotion. "She didn't give me power or money. She gave me her trust when she was dying. And where I come from, trust isn't something you sell to the highest bidder." She gripped her metal wrench tightly. "If you want her, you have to go through all of us. And trust me, humans are very bad at losing. The suspense reached its peak as the drones began to charge their weapons, the humming sound filling the ears of everyone present. Suddenly, Nala stepped out from behind Elena's legs. She wasn't shaking anymore. Her wounds were gone, and her blue fur was glowing with a calm, steady light. She looked at the army of machines and the cold leader of the council. Then, she did something no one expected. She didn't attack. Instead, she released a massive pulse of silver energy that didn't break things, but acted like a giant mirror. Every screen on the space station, from the richest bedroom to the poorest market, suddenly showed a video. It was a memory, Nala's memory. Everyone on the station saw the reptilians locking their doors. They saw the machines scanning for money. They saw the elites kicking a dying animal. And then, they saw the 13th door. They saw Elena's warm hands and her kind eyes. The entire station went silent. For the first time in centuries, the people of the hub felt something they had forgotten: shame. The citizens in the rich sectors began to protest. The workers in the factories stopped their machines. They saw that the weak human was the only one who had acted with true strength. The council leader looked around as his own soldiers lowered their guns. They couldn't fire anymore, the whole galaxy was watching. The Stellar Guardians were not just power sources, they were judges. Nala had chosen the humans as her protectors because only humans were brave enough to be kind when it cost them everything. The council had no choice but to retreat, their drones flying away into the darkness of the upper levels. The 13th door was never fixed. Instead, it was kept exactly as it was, a symbol of the day a human girl changed the galaxy. The poor sector was renamed the Guardian Sector, and it became the heart of the station. Other aliens started coming there, not to bully the poor, but to learn how to be human. Elena and Nala remained together, often seen sitting by the window, watching the stars. Nala's blue glow was a constant light in the dark, a reminder that no matter how cold the universe gets, a single act of kindness can start a fire that never goes out. The legend of the 13th door was born, and from that day on, every alien knew, if you are lost, hurt, or alone, look for the humans. They are the only ones who will always leave the light on for you.